Alex Bowman weight controversy. Hailie Deegan announces where she's going to. We've got NASCAR's version of Spygate. And Kyle Larson won the Roval, so we've got to get into all of it because the last 24 hours has been crazy, so let's do it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, first things first, let's talk about Kyle Larson winning this race and get all of the playoff stuff out of the way, and then we will jump into everything that basically happened today. So Kyle Larson gets win number 29, 30th all-time on the list, passing Carl Edwards and Rex White, Hall of Famer Rex White, 1960 champion Rex White, 6th win this season, and he led 62 laps. So to say he dominated the Charlotte Roval would be an understatement, and the Charlotte Roval itself, I think, was a very good race because of how aggressive all of the other drivers throughout the field were driving it. Yes, Kyle Larson had a really good car. Every once in a while, the 5 team, they just hit it, and when they hit it, the car is just really good because they've got a really good driver in it. I think SVG and probably AJ Allmendinger, if they had been on a similar strategy to Kyle Larson, might could have got up there and made things difficult for him. I think those were the only other 2 cars in the field that could have given him any trouble for the lead, if that makes any sense. But at the end of the day, Kyle Larson gets another win at the Roval. But other than that, I thought the race itself was entertaining by Roval standards. That being said, I think a lot of NASCAR fans still want to see regular Charlotte come back, or maybe, you know, a short track or something else that they would want to see in place of the Roval, including like a Road America, like a real road course if you're going to have a road course in the playoffs. So that's always going to be up for debate. But I thought for a Charlotte Roval race, this was one of the better Charlotte Roval races. Quick rundown of your top 10. Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, 2nd. William Byron finished in 3rd, and there was a little bit of a William Byron controversy, although not his doing. It was more to do with the NASCAR call, but we're going to get to that in the rest of this top 10. Austin Cindric doing all he could do, but he just had too big of a deficit after Talladega for his playoff run. Chase Elliott, nice run for him. AJ Allmendinger getting the 6th place finish there. Shane Van Gisbergen also getting a nice 7th place finish there. Like I said, I thought they had the speed maybe to give Kyle Larson a push, but just didn't have the strategy. Joey Logano with a big 8th place finish, which we're going to get into that as well. Bubba Wallace finishing in 9th place, and that's where I want to jump off here. Because although it was seemingly a small thing, Bubba Wallace was penalized for, you know, cutting the corner or whatever like that. And then right behind him, William Byron seemingly did the same thing. NASCAR released a statement saying William Byron kept his tires on the track. Visually, it did not look like he kept his tires on the racing surface, but it opened up that can of worms once again, where we've talked about this for several weeks in a row now, NASCAR being inconsistent even with black and white rules. And that's why I'm saying, even when the rule is cut and dry, it's written in black and white, it's set in stone, it is still a judgment call at the end of the day, because NASCAR, even with those rules, is inconsistent. And that's not necessarily the biggest deal, because then you've got to put your tinfoil hat on, because Front Row Motorsports in 2311 are, of course, suing NASCAR in court. So if you put your tinfoil hat on and you can once again say, hey, the Hendrick car didn't get penalized, but the 2311 car did get penalized, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying that's why NASCAR did it. I'm not saying NASCAR was even thinking it. But I am saying this. Given the current situation, it is definitely a fair question to ask. Was the 2311 car penalized because it's a 2311 car, and because the 24 car, his team owner is not suing NASCAR? Did they let them get away with that one? Fair question to ask given the current environment. All right, back to the top 10. Ryan Blaney, 10th place here. Tyler Reddick with an 11th place finish. He raced his way into the playoffs, picking up all those spots at the end and originally bumping out Joey Logano. Then you got Carson Hocevar here in 12th. Kyle Busch with a solid run in 13th. Denny Hamlin, 14th. And Michael McDowell rounding out your top 15. And here were your original playoff points when that ended. Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, William Byron all advancing. Kyle Larson currently plus 33. Your new cutoff line drivers would be Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, and Alex Bowman. However, in the post-race, you saw Brad Moran come out with these comments right here.
Unfortunately, when we were running the 48 through, it didn't pass the minimum weight specs. So we pulled the car off to the side and we allowed them to fuel it, which they already did. We let them fuel it again. We let them run the pumps to make sure all the pickup boxes were full. We give the teams every opportunity to try to meet minimum weight. We also have to plug in the water and run the water through the system. to make sure they were full of water, and then we rescaled it. It still didn't beat the weight. We backed it off, and we run it across one more time just to confirm the weights were accurate, and unfortunately they did not meet the minimum weight. They are allowed a 0.5% of a weight break, which is about 17 pounds, give or take. That is what they're allowed, and it was more than that.
So there you go. That was the whole smash there from Brad Moran. He said they give them a certain percentage of 1% or more or something like that, or a 0.5%, whatever he said. Either way, it equals about 17 pounds. They missed it by over 17 pounds. They were allowed to put fuel in the car. They were allowed to make sure the car had all of its water, and they still missed weight. Missing weight is a big, huge thing. Then a lot of people pointed to this photo right here. And in this photo, you see a piece of the car coming off. A lot of people speculating that that was the lead or the tungsten or whatever it was that came off of the car. And then you thought surely Hendrick Motorsport will appeal this. They will not let this stand because the playoffs are at risk. And then, you know, right when I was probably going to make that version of the episode, thinking that Hendrick Motorsports would obviously appeal this, they released this statement. Hendrick Motorsports will not appeal the disqualification of the number 48 following Sunday's race at the Charlotte Roval. NASCAR allows a clear margin to account for the difference of pre- and post-race weight. After a thorough review by our team and sanctioning body, we simply did not give ourselves enough margin to meet the post-race requirement. Although unintentional, the infraction was avoidable. We are extremely disappointed to lose a playoff spot under the circumstances and apologize to our fans and partners. So there you go. Hendrick Motorsports basically just saying that A, depending on your point of view, A, they either missed it, B, they either cheated, or C, they don't want to see the other side of the penalty, because here's what I have to tell you. Right now, they've just missed weight, okay? If you just miss weight, you know, that's the penalty. You're out of the playoffs. However, if, as a lot of people are saying, did the tungsten fall out of the car? Some people are saying it was a piece of fiberglass, that piece that fell out. But if the piece of weight that fell out was a piece of tungsten, that is ballast falling out of the car. And the reason that this is a big deal is because if you go to way back in the day with Darrell Waltrip in the 80s, I want to say it was the 80s, I want to say, he had a thing where he pulled it up out of the car and the ballast would roll out of the car. So they had ballast that came out of the car. So that became a big point of cheating and contention in NASCAR. They started weighing the cars after the race because of this as well, because back then they only weighed them pre-race. Well, that became a big factor of cheating. So missing weight, and especially if there was ballast on the track, that became a huge penalty, almost as big a penalty as if you have an illegal engine. Ask anybody about having an illegal engine. That's a big one in NASCAR. So they might not want to see the other side of that. If a piece of tungsten did come out of the 48 car, that might actually end up being a bigger penalty financially, points-wise, and everything else for Alex Bowman. So they might have just said, you know what, we're going to cut our losses. We think a piece of tungsten fell out of the car, but NASCAR didn't find it, and they're just going to hit us with the weight penalty, and it stinks that we're out of the playoffs. But we're not going to chase it down any further, because if they find that piece of tungsten came out of the car, that's probably going to be a bigger penalty. I don't know for sure, but that's just my thought process, because I always knew back in the day if you missed weight and a piece of that lead was found on the racetrack, then that was a huge penalty. So that's my rationale behind that. Maybe that's why they're not, appealing the weight violation. But since they're not going to appeal it, now we know for sure that Joey Logano will be the driver in that last spot, replacing Alex Bowman. So he will be the driver that has the most spots to make up. And, well, it's an even year, and Joey Logano got another stroke of luck, so the even year theory continues for the Joey Logano fans, and for the Joey Logano haters, well, Joey Logano's back in the playoffs. He has made the final 8, so interesting thing to track going forward. So that was my good race and bad race, but let's go to Milton on Twitter and see who he had as his best race and worst race of the day. He's got Kyle Larson for his best race, giving him a 9.0, which is big for Milton. You'll never probably see a 10.0 from him. Started 6th and finished 1st. He got up to 2nd off the start, but Larson established his true pace afterward after making a pass on the A.J. Allmendinger on turn 7 for the lead. Larson never looked back to take a fine win. Verdict utterly in command. And as his worst race, he had the two teammates tied. He gave the same score to John Hunter Nemechek, but Eric Jones here is the one I'm going to read as the worst race. 3.0, started 37th, finished 34th. Jones was one of the slowest drivers, banging fenders with Kaz Grala unnecessarily. He crashed into Ross Chastain at the final chicane with teammate John Hunter Nemechek taking him out. Verdict, a poor weekend and pace and racecraft. And to be fair, my worst is going to go to Alex Bowman, but I don't judge it necessarily just on racecraft. Alex Bowman, just bad luck. His team apparently just coming in underweight, or they lost some ballast. Either way, his team hurting him there in this particular situation. So bad luck. Bowman strikes once again. He's going to be my personal worst race here because cost him the playoffs, man. And before we move on to the rest of the crazy news that broke today, Chevrolet takes a commanding lead in the manufacturer's points. I'm going to say they basically got this pretty locked up unless something drastic happens. But for second place, we do have a nice battle between Ford and Toyota at 11-20 apiece. So Ford and Toyota tied for second. The battle for second is going to get very intense. And still, mathematically, Chevrolet does not have this thing locked up, even though they do have that 54-point lead in the manufacturer's chase. Speaking of manufacturers, we've got some espionage and some spy work apparently going on at JGR, going to another team. Who is that other team? But let's get to the article first from the AP. NASCAR has acknowledged it is aware of allegations that an engineer for a Cup Series team accessed proprietary information and shared it with another team. The Stock Car Series released no details about the allegations because neither the team has filed a complaint with NASCAR, but a series spokesman confirmed to the Associated Press at Charlotte Motor Speedway over the weekend it is aware of a brewing scandal between the two teams. The engineer is in a contract year with Joe Gibbs Racing, according to executives with 6 teams who spoke to the AP on a condition of anonymity because the details are considered private and have not been disclosed publicly. Joe Gibbs Racing, which has 2 cars still competing for the Cup title, declined to comment. The engineer had been exploring options with other teams as the season draws to a close. Multiple team officials told the AP on Sunday, confirming they discussed possible employment. NASCAR acknowledged to the AP it has heard that one team with no cars in the playoffs paid the engineer for cash in exchange for setup information. Until a lawsuit is filed or a complaint is lodged with NASCAR, there is nothing the series can do, raising concerns that employees will be able to hand over intellectual property to rivals without ramifications. So immediately in my mind, 2 teams kind of jumped out, and I looked at, social media and stuff like that. Social media seems to be focusing in on one team, and the one team that social media, just regular Joes on social media they think it's RCR because they're just tying RCR's run after the Olympics to getting setup sheet information from that guy, linking it, Kyle Busch has connections to JGR, maybe that's had something to do with it or play into it. That is a fine theory. Here is the only flaw with that theory that I see, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying if you're going to counter that, here's the flaw in that theory. If that was actually the case, don't you think Joe Gibbs Racing, if a Chevrolet team was stealing information from Joe Gibbs Racing, don't you think Joe Gibbs Racing immediately would have filed a complaint with NASCAR to get as much of this handled properly as they could, because they wouldn't want a Chevrolet team stealing their information and getting better and running well, right? So I think if it was RCR, it probably would have been escalated to the point of at least a complaint. But really, it could go either way. Maybe Joe Gibbs Racing just didn't see legally any avenue they wanted to go after and chase it because maybe it wasn't worth it to them. To me, it would be worth it to me if you're stealing my setup sheet, but that's just me. So I think you can argue that it was RCR. You can say that's why they had that midseason performance or second half of the season performance boost. But you can also argue that if it was RCR, don't you think Joe Gibbs Racing would have said something about it? Which leads me to my next theory. What's another Toyota team? Because you would think you would want a Toyota setup. It would have to probably be another Toyota team, right? It wouldn't be 2311 because they have a car in the playoffs. How about Legacy Motor Club? Legacy Motor Club, they have Toyotas. They haven't been running well. Maybe they're the ones that were trying to get the information. You're seeing all the restructuring over there. You're seeing people moving all the time. They've got spots open. Maybe that was a situation that they were looking at. Setup sheets haven't helped them if it happened, and the reason I say they could be in it, and this is all just speculation, I'm not pointing a finger at anybody, I'm just speculating who it possibly could be. I'm saying it's them because, well, they didn't want to get on that Joe Gibbs Racing program, but they would use the information to help them build for next season and possibly make their cars faster. And from the other perspective, it's another Toyota team, so maybe that's why Joe Gibbs Racing didn't escalate it, because they're like, at the end of the day, it's just another Toyota team, and they're not a threat to us because they're not in the playoffs, so maybe that's why Joe Gibbs Racing didn't escalate it. But it could literally be anybody, from Rick Ware Racing to whoever. So whoever has multiple cars. We know it's not JTG Doherty, because they only have one car. But other than them, and the Wood Brothers only have one car. So other than them, it could literally be anybody that's not in the playoffs. So I don't know. Who do you think did it? Let me know down below. Those are my thoughts. But crazy. Whoever the engineer is, his career is probably over with, at least for a few years. Because who's going to trust him with your information? Who's going to want to hire that guy? So he probably shot himself in the foot there. And finally, this would normally get a lot more on this, but I feel like this episode has run long enough. But Hailie Deegan has announced her future plans. She is going to run in the IndyCar Next Series for HMD. I'm not familiar with IndyCars, but hopefully that is a good team. Hopefully they can put the people around her to get the performance out of her, because she has the it factor. She's got all the eyeballs. She gets a lot of attention. She just needs the performance on the track. So hopefully they can put the people over there in place to build her up as a driver and continue her career over there. I feel like NASCAR is losing a little bit as far as, they're going to lose some eyeballs because she does bring a lot of eyeballs, but, good for the Indy Next Series because they're going to be gaining some, and yeah. That's all I got for you on this one. Hopefully no news dropped while I was making this one. I had some home repairs today, so this one's coming out a little bit later than normal, but it kind of worked out at the end of the day because I probably would have had to make 3 or 4 videos with all the stuff that happened. So yeah, that's all I got for you on this one. I've made it this far. Would love your subscription. If not, I'll just keep making these things. If you're already subscribed, I appreciate you all as well, and I'm going to cut the rest of it short because this video's been long enough. Thanks for your time. Peace.